There are nights that are simply about music, and then there are nights that become legend. Nights where the sheer force of thousands of souls, all breathing and singing as one, tears a hole in the fabric of ordinary life. This is the story of one such night. A night when Queen, a band at the absolute zenith of their power, commanded a stage before a sea of humanity. At the center of this hurricane of light and sound was a force of nature unlike any other: Freddie Mercury. We all know Freddie the showman, the preening, strutting god-king of the stage who could hold 80,000 people in the palm of his hand with a single note, a single gesture. He was a master of control, the ringmaster of the greatest show on earth. A Queen concert was a tightly orchestrated masterpiece of raw power and theatrical precision. Nothing was left to chance. Every light cue, every guitar solo, every thunderous drum fill was part of a grand design to overwhelm the senses. So what could possibly possess a man like Freddie Mercury, a perfectionist in the midst of his performance, to do the one thing a performer should never do? What could make him stop the show? It wasn't a technical failure. It wasn't a security threat. It was something far more subtle, far more powerful. It was a sound, a single voice lost in a choir of tens of thousands that was so pure, so perfect, that it cut through the noise and found its way directly to the ear of the only man who mattered. This is not just the story of a concert being stopped. It's the story of how Freddie Mercury, in a moment of beautiful, chaotic spontaneity, discovered a hidden star in his own audience, and for one magical song shared his legend with them. The year was 1986, the place, the hallowed ground of Wembley Stadium. Queen's Magic Tour was more than just a series of concerts. It was a victory lap for a band that had conquered the world. They were titans, and Wembley was their Olympus. The air was electric, thick with anticipation and the smell of rain on hot asphalt. The stage lights cut through the twilight, painting the sky in vibrant strokes of red, blue, and gold. For the 80,000 souls packed into that stadium, this was more than a concert. It was a pilgrimage. From the moment they exploded onto the stage, the energy was off the charts. Brian May's guitar screamed with a life of its own, a celestial wail that echoed through the stands. Roger Taylor's drumming was a primal heartbeat, a relentless, driving force that you could feel in your bones. John Deacon's bass lines were the unshakable foundation, a cool, melodic groove that held the glorious chaos together. And then there was Freddie.
He didn't just walk on stage, he owned it. Dressed in his iconic yellow military jacket, he was a bolt of lightning, a blur of motion and charisma. He commanded the vast space with an ease that was simply breathtaking. Every fan, from the front row to the very last seat in the highest tier, felt like Freddie was singing directly to them. He would point, he would smile, he would conduct his famous call and response arias, turning the entire stadium into his personal choir. "Deo!" he'd cry, and 80,000 voices would roar back in perfect unison, a sound so powerful it felt like it could shake the foundations of London itself. The set list was a journey through their greatest triumphs. One vision, tie your mother down, a kind of magic. Each song was an anthem, each chorus a shared declaration of joy and defiance. The band was a flawless machine, yet they played with the raw, untamed passion that had made them legends. Midway through the set, as the energy reached a fever pitch, the familiar, haunting bass line of Under Pressure began to throb through the colossal sound system. A hush fell over the crowd for a split second, a collective intake of breath before the song's tension took hold. The track, a legendary duet with David Bowie, was always a poignant moment in their shows. It was a song about the weight of the world, about the cracks that form under the strain of life, and about the desperate, beautiful hope of love as a way out. Freddie began the opening verse, his voice a delicate, melancholic caress. He sang of the pressure pushing down, the insanity that laughs under its thumb. He was in his element, lost in the emotion of the lyric, channeling the song's soul through every fiber of his being. But then, something happened. Something imperceptible to almost everyone in that stadium, but as clear as a bell to him. As he held a note, floating it out over the endless sea of faces, he heard it. It wasn't an echo from the stadium walls. It wasn't the sound of the crowd singing along, which he was used to. That was a beautiful, chaotic roar. This was different. This was a single, female voice. It was faint, a ghost on the wind, but it was there. And it was exquisite. It was a harmony, a perfectly pitched, ethereal harmony that seemed to weave itself around his own melody. It wasn't just on key, it had texture, emotion. It was the voice of someone who wasn't just singing the words, but feeling them. Freddie, the consummate professional, faltered for a microsecond. His eyes, which had been closed in concentration, flickered open. He scanned the front rows, a flicker of confusion on his face. He continued with the next line, his voice as powerful as ever, but his mind was now in two places at once.
There it was again. On the line, chipping away at my soul, the mystery voice soared, providing a counter-melody so beautiful, so fitting, it was as if it had been written into the song from the very beginning. Freddie glanced over at Brian May, who was engrossed in his own part, oblivious. He looked at Roger, a metronome of power and precision behind his kit. They hadn't heard it. It was his alone. For a moment, he must have thought he was imagining it. Perhaps it was a trick of the acoustics, a phantom sound born from the swirling energy of 80,000 people. He pushed on, launching into the powerful crescendo before the chorus. This was the moment of release, the part of the song where the pressure explodes. He poured every ounce of his being into it, his voice a majestic roar. And right there with him, impossibly, was the voice. It wasn't trying to overpower him, it wasn't a fan trying to get noticed. It was supporting him, elevating him. It was a perfect duet, sung by two people, one on a globally broadcast stage, and the other, an anonymous figure somewhere in the vast darkness. And that was it. Freddie Mercury, the man for whom the show must always go on, decided that this was more important. The music was everything to him. Not just the music he created, but music in its purest form. And that voice was pure, undeniable music. With a sudden, decisive motion, he raised his hand. It wasn't a theatrical pose. It was a command, a stop sign. Roger Taylor saw the signal first, his drumming crashing to an abrupt, questioning halt. Brian's guitar chord hung in the air, a dissonant, unfinished sentence. John Deacon's bass went silent. In the space of 3 seconds, the thunderous wall of sound that was Queen live at Wembley ceased to exist. An eerie, profound silence descended upon the stadium. It was broken only by the confused murmuring of 80,000 people. What was happening? Had the power gone out? Did a piece of equipment fail? Was Freddie ill? A wave of concern washed over the crowd. On the giant screens, Freddie's face was a mask of intense concentration.
He walked to the front of the stage, the silence amplifying the sound of his footsteps. He held the microphone, not as a singer, but as a man on a mission.
Hold on, my dears, he said, his voice calm, but carrying an undeniable authority that silenced the murmurs instantly. Just stop for one moment. He peered out into the darkness, a general in search of a specific soldier on a vast battlefield. The spotlights, which had been painting the stage in kaleidoscopic colors, now followed his gaze, sweeping aimlessly over the first few dozen rows. "There's someone out there," Freddie announced, his voice echoing through the enormous stadium. "Someone is singing with me, and it's bloody beautiful." A collective gasp went through the crowd, a mix of shock and intrigue. He wasn't angry. He was impressed. He was captivated. "I'm not joking," he continued, a smile playing on his lips. "There is an angel singing in my audience tonight, and I'm not going to continue until I find them." The mission had begun. The crowd, now realizing what was happening, transformed from a passive audience into an active participant in the search. People started looking around, pointing, whispering. Freddie acted as the director. "It was over here, I think," he said, pointing to the section of the crowd to his left. "In the front, a lady's voice. Don't be shy, darling. A voice like that has no business hiding." The main spotlight began a slow, deliberate sweep of the area he had indicated. It was like trying to find a single grain of sand on a beach. As the beam of pure white light traveled over the faces in the crowd, people would point at their neighbors, shaking their heads, their faces a mixture of amusement and awe. The beam passed over a young woman, her face buried in her hands, while her friends beside her were jumping up and down, frantically pointing at her. The spotlight operator, guided by the commotion, stopped and centered the beam on her. The sea of people around her seemed to part instinctively. There she was, a girl in her early 20s, dressed in a simple t-shirt and jeans, looking utterly, completely terrified. She was frozen, like a deer caught in the headlights of an oncoming train. This was the source of the divine harmony.
On stage, Freddie squinted, then broke into a wide, triumphant grin. "Ah, there you are," he called out. The crowd erupted in a mixture of laughter and applause. The girl, whose name the world would later learn was Clara, looked as though she wanted the ground to swallow her whole. Security guards began to make their way toward her, and she shook her head vehemently, trying to wave them off. "Don't you dare run away," Freddie commanded playfully, his voice echoing with warmth. "You've stopped the show, darling. The least you can do is come up here and say hello." The encouragement from the crowd was now a gentle, rolling wave of applause. Her friends gave her a final supportive push, and with trembling legs, she allowed the security guards to escort her through the crowd and up the steps to the side of the stage. The walk felt like a mile. She was stepping out of her world and into the realm of the gods. The heat of the lights, the sheer scale of the stage, the sight of her heroes standing just feet away, it was an overwhelming sensory assault. She finally stood on the stage, blinking in the glare, a tiny, anonymous figure next to the larger-than-life presence of Freddie Mercury. He approached her, not with the arrogance of a rock star, but with the gentle kindness of a host welcoming a guest into his home. He put a reassuring arm around her shoulder. "See, that wasn't so bad, was it?" he said softly into the microphone, his words meant for both her and the 80,000 people watching this incredible, unscripted drama unfold. "What's your name, my love?" "Clara," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Clara," Freddie repeated, savoring the name. "Well, Clara, you have a truly remarkable voice.
I heard you from up here over all of this." He gestured to the massive speakers and the roaring crowd. "You were my secret duet partner." Clara could only blush, completely speechless. "Now," said Freddie, his eyes twinkling with a mischievous idea, "I think it's only fair that since you stopped the song, you help me start it again. What do you say?" Her eyes went wide with panic. She started to shake her head, but Freddie just smiled. He turned to the crowd. "Should we let her sing with us?" The response was a deafening, unanimous roar of approval. There was no backing out now. Freddie signaled to the band. Brian, Roger, and John all had looks of amused curiosity on their faces. They had seen Freddie do some unpredictable things over the years, but this was a whole new level of spontaneous theater. Freddie leaned in and whispered to Clara, "Just look at me. Don't think about them. It's just you and me, and a little bit of pressure."